Good morning. Today we look at Acts chapter 23, verses 16 through 35. And as we finished yesterday, we found there was this plot against Paul, that these 40 plus men had signed an agreement that they would not eat or drink until they had killed Paul. And we begin today with Paul's sister's son, his nephew, in other words, heard of this ambush, the plot, and he went to visit Paul in the barracks, in the jail, and he told Paul about this. And when he told Paul about that, Paul called one of the guards, a centurion, and said to this Roman guard, he says, take this young man to the commander so that the commander might hear what he has to say. And in so many ways I think about how that works. You know, here's Paul, a prisoner, but a prisoner for his own protection, really. But he talks to this Roman centurion, and they do what he asks. So this nephew of Paul goes to the commander and takes him away privately and asks, what is it? And he finds out about the plot. Paul's nephew tells him that there's this group of men, 40 men, that are gathered right now, and they're ready, that when you send Paul down to the Jewish tribunal again, that they're going to ambush Paul and the guard, and they're going to kill Paul. And of course, this commander doesn't want that to happen. He's concerned for Paul's safety, and he takes action. But before I talk about that, just think about why would the Jewish council, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, the 70 leaders, that's what were called, the Sanhedrin, 70 leaders of the Jews, agreed to this plot by these people to kill Paul. To me it says that they didn't really think they had a real strong case against him. They didn't have any, what evidence was there against Paul that he would be deserving of the death sentence? It reminds me of, again, as the plot against Jesus. They stirred up a bunch of people to be against him, and that's what happened here. But this commander takes action, and he lets the young man depart, and he tells Paul's nephew, don't tell anybody that you told me this. Don't tell anybody else that you know about this plot. And so the commander calls for 2 centurions, guards, and says to them, prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. And so this is quite a group of 400 soldiers, between the foot soldiers and the spearmen, and 70 mounted to protect Paul on this road as he's on his way to see then Felix, this most excellent governor. And this commander, if he's going to send a prisoner to Felix, to a higher up, he has to send a letter explaining why. And so he does, and he writes this letter, and it's, Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. And then he tells about, Paul. The man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. And coming with the troops, I rescued him, learning that he was a Roman. And so this being a Roman citizen for Paul, offered him that protection, offered him so much, and I think about that as a citizen of the United States of what we have because we're citizens of the United States, and with citizenship, with belonging, there are benefits, and it's the same with belonging to a family, belonging to a church, belonging to a community, where it's just this belonging, this being one of the community members is such an important thing. And so for Paul to be a Roman really granted him a lot of protection. Had he been just a Jew, or had he been something, other, he may not have had this protection. But the commander goes on. He said, when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, brought him before their council, and he was accused concerning questions of their law, but nothing against him deserving death or chains. And then when I was told that the Jews waited in ambush to kill him, I took action, sent him to you. And so as this group of soldiers goes, the 200-foot soldiers and the 200 spearmen go part way to make sure that Paul gets out of the city, and they go quite a distance with Paul that way, leaving at the third hour of the night, the middle of the night in the darkness. They spirit Paul out of town. And when they brought him, it says, by night to Antipatris. And then the next day, the foot soldiers and the spearmen left and came back, and the 70 horsemen continued on the way with Paul. And when they got there then to Caesarea, and they took the letter to the governor and presented Paul to him. And so, of course, the governor read the letter. He asked him about, where you're from and the different things that way. And the governor says, I will keep you under house arrest, protective custody, until your accusers can come. And so Paul has had quite a journey, under guard. And now, he's still somewhat a prisoner, but it's, kind of more of a house arrest. It's for his own protection, for his well-being. And, they didn't change his name. They didn't do any of that like the programs we have today, with the realignment of people and, the witness program. But he was taken out of the power of the Jewish people. And then, tomorrow we're going to read more about it and how the accusers do come. But, the Roman government had systems in place to protect their citizens, to provide for their citizens. And just as when Paul had asked that one guard, are you going to flog me, a Roman citizen, without a trial, without being convicted of something? Being a Roman citizen, as I mentioned earlier, had a lot, gave him rights, gave him protection in so many different ways. But it also, in some ways, worked against him in relationship, to the Jews, to those who were against the members of the way, the early Christians. We haven't yet begun to call them as Christians, but for the most part anyway. But Paul had all of the criteria. We've talked about it. He was a Roman citizen. He was a Pharisee, educated under Gamaliel, one of the most respected religious leaders of the day. So Paul knew the law. He knew all of those things. And the people, the Sanhedrin as well. Many of those same people on the Sanhedrin yet may have been on there when Paul came to get those letters to take, that he could go to Damascus to arrest people. And so they had, they were much aware of the change in Paul, of the Saul-Paul change, and how Saul had been impacted by an encounter with Jesus himself. And as we read in here, there's places in today's text as well that, there were some red letters where, God spoke to Paul and told him, that you'll be safe and to not worry about all of the charges against him. And I think about that for us. Satan could bring all kinds of charges against us. God could bring all kinds of charges against us. But we are citizens. We are believers in Jesus Christ. And by that, we have many rights as well.